Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Track. We're having a good time doing this series. We've talked to riders and team managers and trainers and coaches and privateers and everybody that we can talk to that's involved with Supercross. But today, this is going to be a fun one. I've been looking forward to it. I'm not even going to do a fluffy intro. I'm just going to say hello to Lyle Lovett. Welcome to Beyond the Track.
Daniel, thanks for having me on, man. I'm grateful.
Hey, this is going to be fun. We have a lot to go over. I want to start with your background because it's way cooler than mine. I just want to know what is in your background and the meaning behind it.
Well, the bike is a 1974 Husqvarna 125. In my racing years were from 1971 to 1975 as riding local motocross in the Houston area and around Texas, and my last bike was a 73 Husqvarna 125, and so I was able to find the 74 Husky, and it's the bike. It's one of the bikes that I ride in armor races these days, and so it's a bike I ride, and my jersey is an homage to one of the great teams of the 70s in Texas, the H&H Music Company racing team, with great riders like Steve Hackney and Fred Hanna and Robert Tuggle, who all went on to ride national races, and so we wear the jerseys as a to honor that team in those days, and Troy Lee painted my helmet in the old H&H Music Company colors, and so we all go out and have a great time at armor races at some of the original tracks, tracks that had Trans Am races back in the 70s, places like Rio Bravo Motocross Park in the Houston area.
Is the 32 on the bike? Is that you?
I always ran number 30. In those days for the local races, you just had to pick a number nobody else had, and so I always ran number 32. And so my ARMA number was nice enough to give me 32L. So that's the number I run, and it's it kind of takes me back to my whole life, really. Days of going to the races with my parents. It was going to motocross races 3 or 4 times a month was a great family activity, and you got to know the people that you pitted next to, and I'm still friends with people that I met when I was 13, 14 years old, and I don't think, not necessarily everybody who watches motocross on TV these days realizes how social the sport is, and really how family oriented it is.
Funny you say that, because I'm here. I'm at the Supercrosses. I get to be around all the stars and at the races. It's so cool to be here. But I got a 10-year-old who races, and to be home with him and going to the local track and the racing is still, to me, my favorite part. And it makes me remember my youth growing up racing and traveling, and like you said, meeting people. For me, I have friends I met at 5, 6 years old that are still my friends because I met them at the track. And I guess, is it the same thing for you when you look back at all the experiences that you've had, everything you've watched, to those organic early days? Do you think those are some of the strongest memories you have?
Well, they really are. They're some of the strongest memories I have of being with my mom and dad. I started out riding enduros with my dad, and my mom, dad, and I would all go and woods ride up in the national forest out north of Houston, but in days that I rode motocross, my dad would, he'd work on my bike between motos, and my mom would take pictures, and I've got tons of 8mm film of me and my high school buddies racing together, and those are wonderful memories to see. But just being together with your family, just riding, all 3 of you riding in the front seat because your gear was filling up the back seat, going 2 or 3 hours away to a local track. Those are days I'll never forget, and I made so many friends then, and I saw so many of my heroes race in those days, at the nationals or international races as they come through. And over the years, one of the biggest thrills of my life has been getting to know some of those great racers and great champions, and just to be in the same room with them occasionally when I get to come to Supercross it really is the biggest thrill of my life.
I got to know who.
Well, oh goodness, I've gotten to know Roger and all the folks with KTM, and the first I went to the 1970 Interam in Conroe, Texas, Cycle Sports Park, and I was so disappointed Roger wasn't there. Sylvain Gabors won the race. and Roger wasn't there. And years later, when I met Roger, I asked him if he remembered not being at that race, and he explained to me he was in Japan testing that when that race was held. And so just to be able to have a conversation with somebody like Roger DeCoster, I got to know. I first met Brock Glover in 1983 at the Motocross of Nations. I was in Europe playing music, and I saw posters for the Motocross of Nations, and went. I was in Luxembourg, and that race was in Belgium that year, and so I went, and it was that the team that year was Brock and Jeff Ward and David Bailey, and it was, they won, and it was incredible to watch in person. Another one of the things that I loved about working at Cycle Shack was every year in the winter months, the Husqvarna team would come base out of the shop to ride regional races, and in those days Gunnar Lindstrom was the team manager, and Mark Blackwell was on the team, Bob Grossi was on the team, and I was 15 years old when I first met Mark Blackwell, and who was the first 500cc national motocross champion, and Mark was part of the H&H team. Mark wore a jersey just like that one, and it was, as a 15-year-old kid to meet a national motocross champ, it was an incredible feeling. Years later, I was at a reining horse competition back in 2001 in Oklahoma City, and somebody said something about Mark Blackwell, and I thought, well, there must be another guy named Mark Blackwell. And I turned around, and there was Mark Blackwell. And it turned out that he rode reining horses, and I ride reining horses, and so we got to be horse buddies as well as motorcycle buddies. But I hadn't seen him, in all those years, and was so thrilled to reconnect with him and get to know him in a different context. I mean, he was as good. He is as good on a reining horse as he was on a motorcycle, and but to be able to meet your heroes, is an incredible feeling, and I feel lucky.
Especially like you said, because you're a fan of the sport, so there's that side of it. You get to go to a big race and watch the racing because you love the racing. But then, how about being there in that moment where they win? And I haven't been to a Motocross of Nations yet. I want to go. How was that feel like, just being there with the American team and they get the win? Like, kind of take me through that day.
Oh
I
my
can't
goodness!
wait to go to one of those.
It was incredible. It was incredible. And in those days, the pits were really accessible. And I remember I stood in line and got Roger was the team manager in those days, and I got his autograph that day, and I got to say hello to all the riders. Mark Barnett was on the team that year as well, and just to stand there next to the track. Things weren't sort of cordoned off the way they are these days, and you could just be right there with the photographers and right there with everybody, working the race, and just to be that close to those guys going that fast was really incredible. The first European rider I saw race was Gunnar Lindstrom, who was with Husqvarna in those days, and in March of 1970, after the big AMA short cross and after the big AMA short track and TT at the Astrodome, Gunnar showed up at a local motocross track, the old Fairbanks motocross track, and it was so muddy. It was soupier than it was at the first race in Atlanta this year. Just soupy, and there was this guy wearing a pair of coveralls, riding a Husqvarna, standing up on the pegs, riding around the track like it wasn't even muddy. And it was an incredible lesson to me to watch him ride, and he just beat everybody by a mile. But I really started paying attention to the European riders after that, and watching with great interest when they would come over in the fall of the year, usually in those days, and race the U.S. riders.
Is it weird sometimes when you see a rider that can ride that type of condition well? I mean, I have to imagine that you raced in it. You know how tough it is riding in sloppy conditions. Is it weird when a rider can stand out and be that comfortable in a ground that is so unsettled beneath you and just ride it like it's nothing?
Well, it's so impressive, isn't it? And it's, the first thing I do is start watching as closely as I can so that I can go out and try it myself. But they're doing something right, and it really was a great lesson watching Gunnar Lindstrom that day. But
Aaron,
I've gotten to know, so I've gotten to meet so many of the former champions like Brad Lackey and Ricky Johnson. I mean, they come to my shows, and it's just a thrill for me to acknowledge them from on stage and to embarrass them a little bit in front of the music audience. But I'm just just thrilled to get to know those guys and going to vintage races. So Lackey is so great about showing up and encouraging all the vintage racers and occasionally Brock will even race. There's another great vintage race I love to go to is the Boise Interam up in Boise, Idaho, and that's on one of the original Interam tracks from the '70s. So it's a wonderful atmosphere and a chance to rub shoulders with your heroes and to see how gracious they are and how nice they are to everybody speaks really well for our sport, really.
it is. I think you're right. It's a good image for our sport and how everybody connects, and not only that, but connects in so many different ways. At a Supercross, you got the vintage racing, so there's like a respect, right, that goes all the way back and all the way to now. And I feel what you're saying. Now I am going to bounce around a little bit in this interview, but I'm going to ask you one thing right now because you like vintage racing. You got the Husqvarna right behind you. When you see the riders now on the equipment that they're on, what do you think? I mean, what do you think just that where we've come from in this sport on the technology side?
Oh, it's incredible. It just is incredible. I stopped riding really in 1975 when I went off to college, and didn't come back to it until 1995. And by in those 20 years, motorcycles had changed so much, and it was like learning to ride all over again. But riding a modern bike is great fun. I'm not up to the modern obstacles, the way the young racers are these days. But I enjoy riding a modern bike is wonderful. The perfect combination for me is a modern bike on a vintage track. I I love riding a vintage track with a modern bike. But that's one thing I like about the vintage racing as well is that the tracks are vintage. The tracks are groomed for. I mean, this '74 Husqvarna is has 7 inches of travel in the front and 4 in the back, and so it's the tracks are groomed to accommodate that sort of suspension. But yeah, the new technology is incredible, and just when you think they couldn't improve on the technology, they do, and to see the subtle differences in setup. When the KTM's this season that first got the new suspension components from Europe, and to see how Cooper Webb shot to the front of the pack all of a sudden, and then at Atlanta 2 when Ken Roczen led from start to finish because he'd gotten his Honda dialed in. It's the tuning of the suspension, the subtle differences make the difference in those split seconds that these guys all are within on the track. It's just incredible how closely matched they are, and it seems like, especially this year in Supercross, there's anybody could win on any given night.
Do you think the technology is a big part of that? I kind of do. Where we talked about it before we pressed record, how tight it is in this field, and how you could be winning or you could be an eighth, and maybe you rode the same both days, but the competition's deep like that. Do you think the technology has just found a way to maximize the talents of so many more guys than we did in years past? You think that's a big part of it?
Well, I've always thought that it's the rider has more to do with the combination of rider and machine than the machine does. But these riders are so evenly matched. The technology does come into play, I think, and whoever might and adjustments and settings all are such a fluid thing, and how a bike will feel to a rider on a given day on a given track. And so I think it's an endless search for that perfect combination for a given day. The right tires on a given day, and technology at that level, when riders are so evenly matched, I do think technology comes into it. Now, in the case of the vintage stuff, where we're going out and just having fun, it's the fastest guy could ride. Well, if, Brock Glover has ridden one of my bikes before, and it goes a lot faster with Brock on it than it does with me on it for some reason or other. I don't know why.
I don't know what it is. Why does that happen?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask a couple of things about you and get into your life and your career. You've had an incredible career, but you say you stopped riding to go to college. Take me through that period of time. What were you thinking in life, and when did everything start to, I guess, when did your path kind of begin that led you into the career that you've had?
Well, I always played music, and one reason I was a fan of the H&H Music Company racing team is because I took guitar lessons at H&H, and when I realized that they were that the son of the owner of the company was one of the fastest motocross racers in Houston, I became especially interested in them, and I sought out a job at the shop the team rode out of in those days, a place called Cycle Shack, which was the first Penton and Husqvarna dealer in the city of Houston. A 28-year-old owner named Richard Sanders gave me my first job when I was 14 years old, working in the shop, sweeping up and working behind the parts counter, and that was a tremendous education for me. I loved working in the shop. But I played. I took guitar lessons all through high school, and when I got to college, I started playing out, playing gigs, and not being able to race was a little tough for me, to the point that I almost couldn't go and watch the races. I did go to one national at Lake Whitney and watch the fast guys, but it was hard for me to go to the local races and not race. So I turned my attention more to music, and I found that thrill of being on the starting line, and that thrill of getting to race, and sometimes rub paint in the corners, was it was a very similar feeling I'd get from being on stage, and so playing music and performing kind of took the place of racing for me, and I was able to devote my time and energy to music. And once again, playing music was something I did for fun, just like riding motorcycles was. I'm grateful that my life worked out, that I could, end up doing something that I love to do, that I do for fun, for a living. I mean, that's a rare thing. Most people don't get to experience having something they do for fun turn into the way they make a living, and I am, just eternally grateful that I've been able to do that.
As a racer, the goal is to get noticed as an amateur or a professional, and get your shot, get your chance. Music's the same way. You want to get noticed. You want to get better, and get noticed. When did that happen for you? When did you get recognized and noticed to where what you say was something for fun all of a sudden turned into something for real?
Well, I was playing the same, 5 or 6 clubs around Texas every couple of months up until I was about 25 years old, and I finally thought to myself, I've got to figure out the business end of this, or I need to figure out, getting a real job, and so I recorded some demos with some very talented musicians from Phoenix, actually, that I'd met, and went to Nashville with a handful of songs with a demo tape, and I was just surprised and really pleased that people would take meetings with me and would listen to my songs, and that was in 1984, and I ended up getting a record deal in 1984, a publishing deal and a record deal in 1985. My first record came out in 1986. I was 28 years old, so I thought, well, I'm way too old to start all this. That'll never work. But thankfully, I've been able to make records and keep doing it. Success for me has always been to do well enough to be able to keep doing what you love to do, and so far I've been able to do that. So I count myself as a very lucky man, and I'm grateful to all those people in the audience who keep showing up.
Well, they show up obviously because they love you and they love the songs, and that's leads to my next question. When it comes to songwriting and that creative side, what did you draw from it? And I know every song has its own story and feel and vibe, but what was kind of that draw for you when you needed inspiration and that creativity to put it to a song? Where'd that come from?
You know, I don't think I've ever written a song the same way twice. You know, songs each come with their own experience, and there are lots of ways to write a song. For me, I draw from my life experiences. My songs usually are written more to a single person than they are to. There's one person that would understand one of my songs better than anybody else. I mean, it's not always the same person, but sometimes if I feel as though I have something to say to somebody, I can say it in a song almost better than saying it, you know, in conversation. And so that's where songs come from me. I don't feel as though I'm would be really good at writing a song that somebody would just throw a topic out. I mean, it's a fun exercise to do something like that, but to have a song that you want to play every time you go on stage, to have a song that you feel like represents your whole life, that's a rare thing, and I'm always grateful for those when they happen. They don't always happen.
Not always, right? Sometimes it just lands perfectly, and sometimes you're probably trying to force something and it doesn't work, and sometimes it just organically lands, right?
You can definitely case a triple. The thing is, the thing is, you don't have to play your bad songs for anybody. So I've got a lot of songs that I've never played for a soul.
Just for you, those are yours, right? Nobody else gets those.
That's right. That's right.
You talk about that rush and that kind of that similar feeling. Is that on the performance side where, like, as a racer, when the 30-second board goes up, there's this rush, you get this weird feeling when the lights are out and they're coming on and you're ready to come out and say hit your first song of the show? Was it those same types of feelings that you got racing, where it's like nerves, it's butterflies, but it's excitement, it's adrenaline? Is that what you were talking about those feelings?
Well, it is. You know, when you're standing in the wings of the stage and you know you're about to walk on, it's a very exciting feeling. It's very much like being on the starting line when that board turns sideways. You know, I remember that feeling so well. You know, and it is. There's just a, you know, it's that quality of not being anywhere else at that moment. You know, your focus is all right there. You're right there, right then, with every ounce of attention in your mind and body. And there's something liberating about that, you know, to be that focused and to be that in the moment. You know, there's something that's a, you know, that's a gift, really, to not feel divided and to not feel as though your mind might wander to something else. You're just right there, and it has that same feeling of, hey, I have to pay attention to this, because if I don't, it's not going to work.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a fun question here. So take a rider like Ken Roxon, right, who can be a ninth on one night and then win the next, right? Obviously a big difference in his performance. He probably wants to do perfect every single time, but it doesn't always happen. For you performing on stage, have you ever had one of those nights where it's like, I want to be great tonight, but oh man, I hit the gate, I crashed in the first turn, I crashed in the mud. Have you ever had one of those? I'm assuming it has to have happened.
Well, sure. You know, things go wrong on stage all the time, and there are some nights you're in better voice. There are some nights, you know, you play your guitar better. Technical things can go wrong. So, and I do think of sports analogies a lot of times, you know, and the thing is, if you low side in a turn, you pick your bike up as quickly as you can and you get right back on, and so it is like that, you know. And the key is, you know, it's just like in sports. When you make a mistake, you can't dwell on that mistake. You can't dwell on it. You just have to look. You know, you got to keep your head up. You got to look ahead. You've got to keep your elbows up, and, you know, get on the gas right away. And it's the same way with performing. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, and I make, you know, more than my share, but I try not to let them throw me off, or, you know, I try not to DNF when I'm out there.
So we'll use the same analogy then. Have you ever had a first turn crash, which would say be your opening song? You come out and maybe you're off time, you're out of key, you're just, but then you've been able to kind of short-term memory move on, and by the end you're just nailing it at the end. Have you had those moments?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, it's possible to recover and get better. But I've had things happen on stage that you'd never think would happen. First turn crashes. I tripped in 1992 in Portland, Oregon. You remember these sorts of things. In Portland, Oregon, it's like the track, that you remember. In Portland, Oregon, at the Schnitzer Concert Hall, I tripped over a monitor cabinet on stage and fractured my elbow in the first song. Because I saved my guitar, I mean, and you do that a lot of times with your bike too. But I let my elbow take the fall, and as the show went on, my arm sort of got stiffer and stiffer, and I thought, if I haven't actually broken my elbow, and I stopped the show, then that just wouldn't look good. So I made it, but by the end of the show, I was relying on our lead guitar player to play the guitar parts because I couldn't. But yeah, so things go wrong. You just have to not let them completely stop you.
Is that, do you admire that about the racers too? When you see these riders like a Cameron McAdoo, who same kind of thing. I mean, he went down and then he gets up and finishes, and not only finishes, but finishes strong. You obviously, with your experiences in your life and your appreciation for racing, what do you think when you see something like that happen live on television?
And at the crash that Cameron McAdoo had in Atlanta too was, enough to stop anybody. And the fact that he got up and was competitive and almost passed for second on the last lap, it shows how talented he is, first of all, but that was all heart. That was heart and determination and character, and it really was an impressive ride. Yeah, I just, I'm just so glad he's okay. After seeing replays of it, especially, I mean, that could have been terrible.
That was a tough one, and that's me too. I sometimes I forget because I'm working and I'm in working, but when I step back, I just go, wow, like there's like an appreciation for the heart of these athletes and what they go through and how they respond. And it's again, you get caught up in the moment when you're there, and then you kind of take a step back and go, wow, that guy really did do that. That's crazy.
There was the clip that I watched over and over that was posted by Supercross. There was a photographer. It looked like Guy B. There was a photographer right at the base of the jump, watching as it happened, and rather than take pictures of it, he started looking around immediately, and I'm sure he was looking around for the Asterisk medical team, But he, rather than he didn't lift his camera up, he started looking around immediately as the crash was happening, because he could see how serious it was. I was really impressed with that.
That's high character, because for a cameraman,
oh man,
that's a good shot right there if you could get it. But obviously, I think that has to do with just the camaraderie in the sport, how in moments of need, everyone can maybe drop a little bit of what they're doing and be there for a guy. And even like I said, he might not have been able to do anything, but he was definitely looking to see who he could find. It's almost like his instincts were more about the Supercross family than his own job,
Well, and that, when you go to Supercross, and if you get to hang out in the pits, which I've been privileged to do, thanks to the KTM team and thanks to Brock Glover and the folks at Dunlop. You guys spend a lot of time together. I mean, you spend almost as much time together, especially in these two pandemic years when you've had to quarantine and be in the same location for multiple times, multiple races a week. You do get to be a family, and you see that when you hang out in the pits, and you see, because of the risk involved, you see the concern among everybody involved, and that's a reassuring thing to see from the point of view of a fan, when you see the genuine concern among the former racers, the team managers, the real experts for these young racers who are out there giving it their all every time. And when you see that concern, it makes you feel great about the whole sport, really. I mean, there's so much humanity Yeah, when I saw I don't know if it was Guy B, but he was wearing that hat that Guy B always wears, and I think it was. But when I saw him not lift his camera but look around, I thought, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's crazy you caught that too. That's of all the things going on, you're like, notice that guy right
I,
there.
you know, and I always look for Guy B. When Steve Cox was shooting Supercross and Guy B, I take pictures. I was a journalism major in school when I went to Texas A&M, and I love taking pictures. And so the folks at Racer X, Davey Coombs and Scott Wallenberg, will arrange a photo pass for me, and I get to go down and hang out with the photographers. And Guy B has taken me under his wing more than once and showed me good places to stand and good places to get good shots. And so I have great admiration for their skill, and for they're pretty brave to step out close to the track the way they do and get great shots.
They're brave. They got good instincts too. Because we've talked to some of the photographers here on this show Beyond the Track, and I'm just amazed how they end up getting the shots they get. It's like, how do you know that's coming? And they somehow do.
They have incredible instincts and incredible technical skills, and they do get amazing shots, don't they? Yeah, I'm in awe of them, but I do love to take pictures. I've gotten to go out to, gosh, when the KTM team was Ryan Dungey and Muskin and Anderson was riding the Husqvarna and training. We were in Florida on tour one time with a day off, and Alden Baker invited me to come out to his place, and so I shot lots of pictures that day and got to hang out with the guys, and it was really impressive to spend a day there and to see just how scientific their training was.
How about how about that smell, the race gas? How do you like that smell?
It's not. I'm an old two-stroke guy, so it's not bean oil, but it's still pretty satisfying. When you when you smell that the smoke of a two-stroke, or you smell that race gas from a four-stroke. For me, I feel right at home.
I feel like the first round of the championship is always that way for me. As soon as I get in the building and they start riding, I went, okay, it's time to start the season, because now I got that very distinct smell. That smells like nothing else in the world. Is that race?
Yeah, that's right. That's
And
right.
so I do want to talk about your career again on the music side, obviously incredible, but then the acting side came into play too. When did that come into play? How did it come into play? And do you like that side of entertaining?
I've gotten to act a few times over the course of my career. I mean, it's not really my real job, but it was thanks to the great director Robert Altman, casting me in a film in 1991 called The Player. Came out in 1992. That I got to do some acting, and I worked with Altman several times, but I really enjoy acting. In terms of acting, you get to see a different way a different kind of artistic expression. It's a different medium really, and getting to do some acting has really it makes me appreciate actors more than I did before, and it makes me, well, it's something to learn. You get to go out. It's like getting to be an occasional participant in a film. It's sort of like getting to go out on the track with people who are faster than you, and people you can learn something from, and that's always fun.
So I got a really cool tie-in, and I don't know if you know this. I don't think you're going to know this, but you're going to find out right now. I'm pretty sure. A good friend of mine is a former Supercross racer. He ended up being a freestyle gold medalist in the X Games. He ended up being a stunt rider on a movie that you were in. Do you remember your time in the movie The New Guy?
Well, yes, I do. In fact, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So he was a stunt rider in The New Guy.
So do you remember the scene where the new guy is going to the party and he gets pulled by his buddies on the bike in the car to look cool at the party? And then he goes Superman crazy and crashes the bike into the bushes and gets up like it's all cool. My friend Mike was the stunt rider for that, and he says he still gets royalty checks every once in a while. They're not very big, but he was the stunt rider for the new guy in that, and I just think that's funny because you were the dad of the new guy in that.
I was the dad of the new guy, and yeah, that was it was a crazy and fun film to be on, and well, that's great to know. Yeah, that's a great scene, and yeah, DJ Qualls was, yeah, he was a really nice young man.
Yeah, my friend Mike, who did that, said he'd never done anything like that before. He's never done anything since. He somehow, I think maybe someone was unavailable, so he got the gig, and he said it was like the craziest experience ever, just doing that one scene of that movie. And he said he met the main actor. Would you say his name? I
Yeah,
forget.
DJ Qualls, yeah,
Met
yeah.
him and met everybody there. So yeah, I thought that was a funny tie-in back to Supercross. A former
Oh man,
Supercross racer was kind of in that movie with you.
how cool, how cool. Well, I wish I'd have realized that at the time.
So back to Supercross and you being a fan of the sport. Obviously, you're up to date. You're watching the races. Who's your favorite, or some of your favorite riders that, from either a style standpoint, a character standpoint, or just their story? So who are some of the riders that you really, really like and appreciate?
Well, it's hard to not like and appreciate all of them. I mean, I really appreciate all of them, and you know, just watching you all on television explain you do such a great job explaining the races and what's going on the track to the fans at home watching. I mean, your knowledge is deep. Being a former racer yourself, you know what you're seeing. Ricky Carmichael, I think, is doing a great job in the booth, and always has such, you know, such smart observations, and just makes watching that much more enjoyable. You know, RC was. You know, he was an amazing champion, but and when I started racing or started riding in 1995, I started following Supercross again. I mean, I went to the very first indoor motocross before they called it Supercross in 1974 in the Astrodome. In 1975, I remember seeing the first. You know, there were the jumps weren't designed to be doubles or triples in those days, but there was a section on the back straight where all of a sudden a racer jumped two jumps at once, and his lap time was much quicker than the other racers, and then more, you know, more of the racers started doing it. So it was really interesting to see all that develop. This field, you know, I'm a Penton, so KTM Husqvarna guy from way back. So my sentimental favorite is the KTM team, the KTM group, which is amazing to see it extend to Gas this year. You know, and I'm a big fan of Troy Lee's as well, so I appreciate his team. But to see to follow the KTM racers and because I've met them too, I you know I feel a special connection to them, and the Husqvarna team. Gosh, Zach Osborne is has had, you know, such an amazing career and has overcome so much adversity. But I met Ken Roxon when Ken was probably 17 years old in the KTM trailer in Houston, and so even though Ken's riding Honda, you know, I always pull for him and hope he has a good race, and you know, to watch Eli Tomac and how consistent he is. I was at a race in, gosh, it was 2014, an outdoor motocross at Freestone in Texas, and I had a photo pass, so I was hanging out with the photographers and taking pictures. And Johnny T, Eli's dad, was there, and we started talking during a 250 race, which Eli won. And as soon as Eli came in from the track, his dad introduced me to Eli, and I'm sure Eli was thinking, Dad, don't make me meet somebody. I just want to race, you know. But he couldn't have been nicer, and he was all sweated wet, and it just won the moto, so I you know I love, gosh, just the grit and the skill and the determination of all these young riders, and to watch the young 250 riders come up, and to see a you know a rookie like Chase Sexton do so well in the 450s, uh, in his rookie year. I mean, it's really impressive. But yeah, I'm pulling for Cooper Webb and Marvin Muskin and Jason Anderson and and Justin Barsha this year. You know.
Last night, or the Atlanta 2, Webb had a tough night. Anderson had a very interesting night. Barsha and Webb got into all your guys had had interesting nights. So.
It was, yeah, it was an interesting night. Yeah, my picks. Some of my buddies and I do picks for every race, and yeah, I didn't make the podium last night with my picks.
You didn't have your best night.
It was a wild night. Yeah.
Do you like the fact? I mean, to me, when I think of like the stick and ball sports, you have the different teams, and each team has their own identity. You know, depending on their history, who they are, who's on the team. In Supercross, the individual rider is kind of like it's his own franchise, right? And when you think about Roxon and Tomac and Webb at the kind of the top of that field, and the rest they work their way down. Do you like how different each character is? I mean, the Aaron Plessinger. I mean, think about how he is as a person. Adam Cianciarulo. Do you like that part of Supercross, knowing that we have 10 to 15 really good athletes at the very top, and they're all different? I don't know two that come across the same to me. It's just
You
diversity is cool.
Well, I think so too. My mom always told me growing up there are many correct ways to do something, and each of those champions are great examples of that. And as individual as the sport can be, to see the influence of great former racers and great former champions, to see Roger DeCoster's influence on not just the riders, but the technology. You know what Roger has done to develop those bikes, the KTM's and Husqvarna's and the gas gases now. It's an amazing technological advance since he's been working with them. To see the, to see Johnny O and to see what Alden Baker does in his training, to see the level of fitness, to see the dedication that each of these racers, has to, they have to be just completely dedicated to what they're doing, and you see that. It's so impressive to see these young men who are married and have very young children in many cases, to see them out there and be so dedicated to their sport, and to see them also be dedicated to their family. I mean, to see Ken Roxon, in the pits in photos in the pits, or just after crossing the finish line, to hold his his infant. It's that's a pretty special thing to see how important family is to them, and to see how even family commitments does not affect their dedication to their sport. I mean, it's really impressive.
Yeah, when you see them on track, they're athletes, they're warriors, they're competitors. You feel like it's good when they come off, to get the helmet off, and get to see that human side, and realize that he's a new dad. And sometimes I think we forget, because they're just these athletes, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, he's a dad, and he's a husband, and he's just a regular guy. I mean, I saw him today riding around with his dog on his little scooter, and it's like, I feel like even I sometimes forget that these are just regular people that live like regular lives, away from the fact that they're also these superstars. Is that kind of what you mean about, you mentioned earlier the human side of the sport? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Well, I think it's all of us who are fans can identify with these racers when we see their human side, when we get to have a glimpse into their family life, and to see how important that is to them. But make no mistake about it. I mean, they might play regular guys in the pits, but regular guys can't ride the way they do. They really are superhuman athletes with skills that very few people, there aren't but a handful of people in the entire world capable of making the main event in a supercross race, or making the starting line in an outdoor motocross race at that level. They are exceptional athletes, and so gifted that it keeps the rest of us who are fans of the sport watching year after year and season after season.
That makes sense. That is the tie-in, I think, right there for sure. All right, I got two more questions for you. One on the racing side, and one on the personal side. I'll start personal. What do you got going on right now? What motivates you? What are you looking at in the future that you either want to do that you've done in the past, things that maybe would be new? Just what's the future look like for you?
I'm 63 years old, my first record came out in 1986. I'm so grateful for my career, and I still love to play and sing and go on tour as much as I ever did. And I get to, the key to enjoying your work, for me, the key to wanting to go back out every time is the people you work with. I work with musicians who play music like the racers in Supercross ride. I mean, they're exceptional. They teach me every time I walk out on stage with them. They bring things to my music that I couldn't even imagine myself, and that's what keeps me going. I get to work with talented folks. I get to meet the nicest people in the world who come to my shows. I haven't toured in the last year because of the pandemic. And we all put on a brave face and act like everything's all right. But things really aren't all right. And so many people have lost people. And sporting events like Supercross have have really been bold and so uplifting to those of us who have been isolating and staying home. That you all last year went to Salt Lake City and finished the season that way, and the way you've organized the season this way to be able to make it safe for people to come to the races, and just so that those of us not going out, those of us staying home, could watch on television. That's really something, and I hope you all feel the appreciation from the fans for getting out there and being at risk yourself. And I know it's as safe as you can make it. I know you all are tested. I know you all are as careful as you can be. But you are more at risk than those of us just staying home. And I just want you to know that I and my family appreciate what you're doing, because we enjoy watching, and it's a real boost to our morale and our spirits.
And thank you. I haven't heard it that way. That's very nice, man. Thank you so much, and I'm glad we can. And yeah, it's obviously been a tough year, and I think we're all hopeful that we get past it, we get back to normal. But we're all kind of challenged or taking this challenge on and getting through it. So to hear you say it that way, that's very nice. Thank you so much. My last question for you then is back on the racing side. We've talked about the motorcycles and the technology. We've talked about the riders and their character, the family side, your history doing it. Of all those variables, what do you think is your biggest draw to Supercross and to motorcycles and to the racing? Like what draws you in the most? What is it for you that really makes it work for you?
Oh gosh, well, it's just the appreciation of what the riders are actually doing, and it's that feeling of knowing, knowing what it feels like, and knowing the extent to which they all go to do what they do, and it's just it's because of having some experience doing it. I mean, not certainly in my case, not at that level, but having enough experience doing it to appreciate what they're doing. Gosh, it's fun to watch every time. I have such admiration for the effort it takes. From the some of the most dedicated people in the pits are the guys that drive the rigs from race to race. I've gotten to know some of those guys as I've hung out, and they're as dedicated to what they're doing and to make sure everything's right for their racers every time they set up the pits. The team effort that it takes, the way everybody pulls together to make the races happen, to support those elite athletes that end up going around on the track. It really is something to see, and every time you work on your own bike, every time you set up your your tent at the racetrack, every time you load up your own trailer, you think about that, and you think about how just what a tremendous effort it is to make the races happen.
Lyle, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I've been very excited for this interview, and it was a great conversation. I just want to say thank you so much.
Daniel, thanks for your thoughtful questions. You guys keep up your great work, and really thank you for being out there. It means a lot to all of us fans who like to watch.
Thank you, Lyle.